I'm a skeptic about the ISON comet, and I have a couple of questions. Why should I or anybody care if this comet is circling the sun and is going to increase radiation on Earth?
That's a great question, and I've asked myself that. Knowing about some renewable energy and the electric universe, I believe our fragile electrical grid is not as protected as it could be, and that some geomagnetic storm could have some electrical disturbance on our planet. It depends if that radiation is accompanied by electricity as well.
All right, the last time, a big one to look up that's proven, we can go to Google, is the Carrington event in 1859, and that happened in Michigan, right?
Well, it actually happened in far more places than that. Yeah, so let's step back to the 1859 Carrington event. It actually occurred in September, and it was far wider ranging than you've just said. It was not just in one single location.
So what happened?
Well, let's compare 1860s telegraph lines, the chunky, huge iron devices that clicked a wire. Let's compare it to something like our iPads or Mac Air. What's the fragility of that? That was an incredibly hefty system at that time. And the basic answer to that is our lifestyle is so based on this fragile electrical grid. It's not protected from what you're talking about, increased radiation or electrical pulses from the sun. If it's all connected to the grid.
For how long?
Well, how long would it be during a typhoon or a hurricane? And how long does it take to repair all that before your electricity is restored? At the minimum, you could expect that. Do you have a refrigerator?
I do.
If it stops, what do you do at that point?
And it would stop because of an electrical surge?
That's right. Now, if you notice, when power surges come, it's a trip event. So it's not exactly the entire grid's affected, but it starts in one place and spreads to the rest of the grid. So even if you're hundreds of miles away and an electrical event happens because of a large solar flare concentrating someplace on the planet that supplies you with the electricity, yours goes out even if you're hundreds of miles away.
Now you're saying that this happened in 1859 and it was caused by the electrical universe theory, EUT?
We call it EU. It's the electric universe theory, of course. Comets are electric. They're almost cosmic capacitors. They interact with the sun electrically. I mean, gravity's part, yes, but electrical connection as well. And also the sun reacting with comets electrically to cause more coronal mass ejections.
All right, so you're basing all of your projections and warnings on something called the Carrington event.
The world's largest geomagnetic storm that was measured by modern instruments.
All right.
And what was the effect of the telegraph lines during that time?
It melted them?
It didn't melt as in turn them into liquid, but they all caught on fire. They caught the poles on them that were on fire. And also at the stations where they have that really clunky, like pieces of metal, sparks were flying out a meter, 3-4 feet out of where they actually put the signal in and burned some of the operators because the sparks were coming out that far.
Where did that happen?
In the United States and in Europe, both. Station would catch on fire at that time, but what about the electrical devices we have in our house now? What about those main currents that are coming back in? What if each one of those starts to shoot out a flame? At least the plastic covering will catch on fire in your house.
All right, so what should we do? Unplug the refrigerator? Unplug the microwave? Because this is in the air. This is not coming just across electrical wires, right?
That's right. It's in both. But you could actually cut yourself off from the house if you turned off the power going into your house and actually disconnected that grid with no physical connection to it, so there was literally a fire break between your house and the grid. That would give you some time, but you're right. Electric universe theory talks about there's electrical plasma in all space, and all we have to do is draw that energy out of space itself. Nikola Tesla talked about this in 1880s, 1890s. If you're seeing red auroras in Cuba, everything else north in Ohio and around to New York, their instrumentation's being destroyed.
All right, you began by asking me, do I have a refrigerator? So I should unplug my refrigerator. I certainly want to unplug my high-priced computer. I mean, really, we'll have to ride this out, won't we?
You do have to be disconnected from the electrical grid somehow. The plasma charge is actually in the air itself. it's not only from the sun. Everything around you is plasma. You live in a universe that's full, complete. It's 99.9% energy itself that's vibrating faster because the comet's electrically connected to the sun, and those electrons and protons are more highly charged. There's more of them coming at us, and we get more highly charged. And that affects the electrical systems. Things can be plugged in, or they can be not plugged in. Which one? If you have a lightning strike on your house, would you want your computer plugged in the wall where there's way extra electricity coming in your house through those? You didn't want it to, but it got hit by lightning, so everything got overcharged. Bzz. Do you want your things plugged in during a lightning storm that gets hit by, or do you want them unplugged?
I want them unplugged. Why don't people know about this? Why isn't this as big a deal as the
news portrays it to be?
Or the 2000, what was that called? Where the computers weren't going to work?
Y2K.
Y2K. Yeah, why isn't there as much panic or as much worry about this as Y2K?
This one's real.
Why isn't there media reports everywhere and warnings?
Well, it has been spoken about on some of the news channels, especially I like this Brian Williams clip. It was about 45 seconds. I think he says, there's a big, bright, brilliant comet coming in November. You may want to stock up on snacks and beverages. Was that a subliminal way to tell people?
But you're saying that what happened, the Carrington event, could happen again in a much greater degree in November, December of 2013. And to prove your point, you're saying it's already begun. In October 19th through the 21st, there were some events that happened on the Earth because of the comet Ison.
That's correct. There was a T-junction between Mars, comet Ison, and Earth that also connected back to the sun. Now, I was saying that because it's an electrical universe, that the sun is pulling to comet Ison out to space, that these Birkeland currents would be more electrified and there would be some electrical disturbance. I predicted more earthquakes during that time. You can't tell me that November 19th through November 21st, the internet went down in the Northeast United States. And November 19th through November 21st, when I predicted, and the orbital diagrams, they show that the connection was there mathematically. So what's the coincidence of these mathematical probabilities happening that overlap in time, the 19th to the 21st?
Hi, this is the Skeptic, and we're talking with Plasma Dave about the Ison comet that may or may not, be affecting us and will affect us through December. All right, Plasma Dave, you say that people can find proof of the effects of this plasma from the week of October 23rd through October 29, 2013. Prove it.
Will science work and mathematical fact, would that be enough for you, or should we just work from conjecture and speculation? Which one would you like?
Whatever, just prove it.
Now let's start back at LASCO C2 images. You'll notice over that entire last week, every single day, several times per day, there were either coronal mass ejections coming off the right side of the sun, there were either filaments that were pulling out. If you notice in a couple of the photos here, there's specific, you can definitely see the filaments pulling out of the equator there. Also, you would expect to see more energetic lightning, something called sprites. It's upper atmospheric lightning between 30 and 90 kilometers above. The last thing, we're going to look for more radio outbursts and more radio disruption, if you will, over the next couple of weeks as well. The protons come in. They act like a sponge. They actually soak up the radio signal, so the more of them come in and the wider the layer is, the less radio frequency can actually go through that layer. Protons are sponges. They take up radio signal. So, sprites, radio signals, and more flares coming from the right side or western limb of the sun, especially along the equator or just north of that to about 40 degrees or south of that. Filaments, plasma filaments.
All right, well, you could prove that if someone comes to you and says, come on, you're using...
Well, why would I do that? Why don't you take a look at some of your own information? We have something called the internet. You can look and back up and verify any of these facts.
So you're saying, all right, so the activity that's happening, if I'm looking at the sun, look to the right-hand side and it's really noticeable, this activity's happening.
That's right. The right side is actually the western quadrant of the sun, and the sun spins in an opposite orbit as ourselves. So the west is actually the east, and the east is actually the west, which is the right side. So when you look there, you're looking just like our own planet. There's an equator, a front line. You're going to look for more of those things shooting out, whether it's a coronal mass ejection or a filament. It looks like a piece of string that's highly energized, very kind of yellowish red that'll pull off of the sun. There were 26 eruptions in the last week during that time of M and X-class flares. There were 4 X-class flares.
Can I click on, I don't want to leave YouTube. Can I click on a link and see it?
You sure can. If you take a look below, it'll take you to the direct LASCO C2 satellite feed where you can put in movies and make that work on your own. You can enter the dates, make sure you press the movie circle at the bottom, press set, and they're ready to go. And it'll load up all those photos, up to about 500 photos, that'll turn into a quick movie for 1 minute. And you can see the eruptions yourself, and you can watch the sun in real time every 7 minutes or so.
And the second way to prove this is through radio signals.
If you go to the Space Weather Alerts and Warnings timeline in the NOAA website, you can find a 15-day plot that they track every solar disruption, solar flare, radio X events, any types of space weather. It's all plotted into a table, and there's one specifically called radio events. Now, there was radio disruption on our planet 4 different times in that last week, and that was one of the things I said would also be a precursor. Look for an increase in radio disruptions. The longest one was 15 minutes on the sun-facing side. The last couple were 1 minute here for low-frequency radio disruption and like 10 minutes for high. I'll leave a link for that at the bottom so you can check it out again. I'll just click so you can go directly to that page. I'll save you the time of surfing through the site. It's very confusing in a lot of these. You have to go through several windows to find the information.
And I'm not very smart, so yeah, so I appreciate that. All right, Jason Woodring, 37 years old. He's got to live in the South somewhere. He believes what you do, and he's going to disconnect his house, or because you're going to build a Faraday cage. You're going to talk about that. But this guy, Jason, was going to disconnect his house, and he caused a heck of a. They're going to make movies about guys. Comedies about guys trying to protect their house from this ISON. But he's in big trouble, Jason, right?
Right. He was trying to disrupt the entire grid at the 115,000 kilovolt line level. I was talking specifically just about your home. When you have a large cable that comes in to power a neighborhood, there's going to be junctions off of that, and one of those off the large cable will feed into your home, which is a smaller cable. What I was talking about was disconnecting your house from the grid. But remember, there's no way for you to disconnect the neighborhood level at the box, so you're going to be working with live electricity, which is very scary at that level coming into your house. So you need to be incredibly cautious, but that's what I'm talking about, a fire break between any kind of line coming into your house that could be overcharged, jump a breaker, jump a fuse, and then get in and go down the smaller little wires in your house to your sockets.
I think we should try to find Jason Woodring and do a 3-way with him.
Well, he was arrested on federal charges for taking down, again, the power grid, trying to a wire across.
See, this is what's going to happen. This is what I'm trying to prevent. So I'm talking to you about this. You think that a Faraday cage is the way to go? What the hell is a Faraday? Is it free? Do I have to buy one?
Well, you need to buy some copper net mesh wiring.
All right.
That's it. You can find that at any local hardware store.
Not 7-Eleven.
Not 7-Eleven.
Okay. All right. Hardware
That'll be
store.
out of food within a day, though.
All right. Okay. Hardware store. You make a cage.
You make a cage. You need to make it the size that you want to protect everything that you have. Okay, so we have a 35-inch plasma screen TV. You're going to have to make a cage large enough to encompass that.
So we have to disconnect everything.
How about one for your car as well?
So we have to disconnect everything in our house, complete, and then put it in this box, and then afterwards put it back up again. Wow.
That's right, but you should have some warning in advance. It'll be a major, super huge, gigantic thing. That the Carrington event was visible with the naked eyes when it happened in 1859. So something as large, you would definitely be able to see it visibly with your eyes unless you're in a cloudy location. I bet the clouds would illuminate even more, where something funky would happen in the sky where you would notice that it was brighter just through the cloud layer too. There would be some sort of sign.
All right, I'm back to being skeptical. Somebody actually gave me a question to ask you. So if this thing is strong enough to fry my computer while it's off, why wouldn't it fry my brain? You keep thinking it's a good thing or potential bad thing for computers, but I'm going to put foil around my head and walk around with that to protect myself. See, I think I'm taking better precautions than you are.
Well, that's not going to work.
Why? I bet you Jason would say yes.
Everything in the universe is frequency and vibration. Everything from how vibration can heal, everything is frequency. Natural earth energies are frequency, we are frequency, our brains are frequency, everything's frequency. If it vibrates higher, it's very possible that there could be some corridor or conduit in our brains that would open up that would allow us to see things a little bit differently during this time.
So we could become smarter.
Depends if you are into absorbing information. Is that corridor of your brain open, yes or no? And are you willing to accept new information?
We're now in the first week of November. What are we going to see in the next 10 days?
Now, since everything is vibration and frequency, you'll start to notice things vibrating differently, vibrating at a higher level because there's more influx, plasma, protons, electrons, electricity, whatever you like to call it. There's more of it in the air. So you'll notice people behaving differently. Possibly your animals you've noticed in the last week have behaved very strangely. This is what I'm talking about, the vibration of everything going to a higher level. Now, will that, in turn, like you were talking about, the human mind, will this open a corridor or a conduit that allows us to think differently during this particular time? And the last thing would be, during the conjunction of Mercury, the Sun, and Comet Ison coming up November 15th, you would expect a large plasma filament to come from the Sun, connect to Mercury, and then from Mercury, that plasma filament connected electrically to Comet Ison would then jump and arc back to the comet, which already has an incredibly long tail. So you would see something, a plasma filament erupt from the Sun that's incredibly long that connects to Mercury, out to Comet Ison, and then out further off the tail there. We're talking 60, 70 million miles of plasma. Look for strange things in the sky. If you see something where you thought your eyes weren't working right, where you saw a flash of maybe a blue color or a pink color or any kind of color that you see, and you're like, did I just see that? You did. That's what I'm talking about. Electrical phenomenon.
If the Ison comet, I don't really know if it is, if the Ison comet is going to affect the Earth, how can we help somebody to prepare for it? And if it's practical advice, I'll probably even follow it.
Think about the preparation you might have for a blizzard or for a typhoon or hurricane that would come for those of you living along coastal areas or mountain areas. How long? What would you prepare in advance? Water, some food, some lighting. For 7 days to 15 days off the grid with no electricity supply, what would you do? And how would you cook your food as well? Think about everything in the cities or whatnot uses electricity to pump the water, so eventually the water would run out within your faucets and taps.
All right, crime would go up.
The toilet.
And usually during blackouts, crime increases. Be less police force, cameras would be down. There'd be no lighted areas, right? It would just be dark areas. Criminals, if they were to believe you, or the bad elements in the world could prepare for this and take advantage of the unprepared.
And how would they prepare? They would probably garner more food and water themselves because they could last longer if they had more guns.
Watch, I'm saying they would do exactly what you're saying now.
Exactly what I'm saying. In advance of maybe having an opportunity to pillage. But this is where knowing your neighbor comes back in really, really handy. Now, let's say you don't know your neighbors. You live in a big city. It could be anywhere in Asia. It could be anywhere in the United States, Europe. You know, how many people really know their neighbors that live in an apartment complex? You should really start to get to know some of your neighbors around. It's a shame that we don't know our neighbors the way our grandparents used to. They knew everybody on the city block. They knew every kid by name, all the parents. You don't even know your next door neighbor in a city. How are you supposed to help as a single individual? You have to come together. Like your bandits you're talking about, they're not going to come into neighborhoods where they know the neighborhood's banded together.
That's because they prepared. I'm thinking
easier targets,
the evil place will go people that have not prepared.
And they'll go to those are the easy targets, people who did not prepare.
All right, so we need candles, we need batteries, we need food and water for 17 days?
I don't know. Think about a hurricane or typhoon. What's the longest one that you can remember where people went without food or had problems taking care of themselves?
You know what this is, if I might be the skeptic.
Earthquakes as well, you know, some places are cut off, remote Pakistan. There were weeks without anything.
This is exactly like Armageddon.
Armageddon, not even. That had some sort of impact with the Earth. I'm only talking about electrical interaction with the Earth from the comet to the sun. And that's a huge difference between an impact and an electrical interaction that fries some of the circuitry and power grids on our planet. At least for a short time, maybe permanent damage, we just don't know, because it just depends on how excited the sun could become. And there's been X45 flares before that they've measured. And the one that just popped off the sun, the last 4 were like X2.1, right around 2 or low 2s down. But they were still considered X flares. Imagine something 20 times more powerful that's directed directly here and then wraps around part of the Earth exactly on a power grid somewhere. Bzz, that's going to go down. Now, all this is in the event of the comet surviving its trip around the sun. Once it gets around the sun, all of these things that I'm talking about take action. Right now is sort of the calm before the storm. What you see going from now until November 28th, that's the precursors, the events before the storm. After it rounds the sun, if it survives its trip, pulling back toward Earth, it's going to be ripping all that CME and all that sun-ejected plasma toward the Earth, pulling it electrically, directing it to us and our magnetic field lines for the whole month of December. That'll be 30, 60, 90 direct hit flares. Like how much can the Earth's magnetosphere protect from that if it's just one after another after another? It requires a little recovery time until those magnetic field lines bounce back and reconnect. A trip around the sun means that you need to start preparing to get ready for the Category 5 electrical typhoon that's about to pass. The eye of it over the Earth is the equivalent if that comet survives the trip around the sun.
This is an add-on. After our interview, a couple people had asked, do you mean this is the end of our civilization as we know it or parts of it? And the answer was, no, it's not. What I'm trying to explain is that the elephant is now in the room. Comets, specifically this comet that we're watching, I'm trying to show the electrical nature of the comet by the interaction with the sun. If this is true and proven as theory and fact, instead of all this conjecture where people are unwilling to accept these ideas that comets have electrical influences with other bodies in space, and they can no longer discount it, where they must start now experimenting with ways to pull electricity from space. But this throws everything in disarray that our society is based on and the way commerce operates. We operate on oil and gas now. If we substitute that instantly with electrical current pulled from space, this is going to create a problem, not only garnering taxes that we pay when we pay our monthly electricity bill. All these types of things are going to decimate the stock market and the commerce system as we know it. But now the idea of electric comets is so in your face, and this comet's going to prove everything about electrical conduits in space, Birkeland currents, plasma discharges, effects on our planet, coronal hole effects creating earthquakes. Everything's electrically connected. And